start mailing with the Sioux Empire Podcast. I'm here with Thor Bardon.
Hey, how's it going?
Yay! I got it right. Just waiting for like a weird pronunciation or something like that.
Oh,
no. And what's really sick is we had you here like 2 weeks ago, and I'm just so bad at last names. It's criminal. Really, it is.
Yeah, you know, what's interesting is that the autocorrect actually changes it to Brandon if you're not being careful. So it's...
Putting it in the show notes tonight. It was doing that to me.
Oh, goodness. Oh, well, fantastic. I'm glad that you got it.
Yeah. So, your candidate for Central District?
That is correct. Sioux Falls Central District.
Yep. Sioux Falls Central District City Council. Let's see. I am going to go ahead and let you, if you want to give like a thesis statement for why you're running or anything like that. Like if you got a mission statement. Otherwise, we can jump right into the listener questions.
You know, I'll just give my standard introduction. I mean, well, I don't know if there is such a thing as a standard introduction anymore, but I'm Thor Bardon. I'm 29 years old. I own a house in Folsom Edition, which if you're not familiar with where that is, there's the what used to be the Brendan Rock and Roll Academy. There's a U-Haul. I'm about 3 blocks south of that, close to downtown.
You don't live in the U-Haul, do you?
No,
Okay,
I don't live in the U-Haul. You know, I used to be homeless, but I lived out of a car at that time. But no, I bought a house actually across the street from a place that I was renting. I've been in that house for about 3 years now.
Nice.
Family, I live with my dog. Her name is Dixie. She's 6 years old.
Aw.
Come check it out on Facebook. I've got a page, Thor Bardon City Council. There's a picture of her. I'm actually holding a piece of bologna. She's licking her chops. It's a pretty good picture.
Nice.
And, you know, I don't know. I've lived in Sioux Falls since they tried to take down the Zip Feed Tower. That was a very interesting event. That's right. I actually got here the month before that.
Nice.
And
very auspicious time for Sioux Falls.
Very interesting, absolutely. But you know, that was a really good cause that they were doing back then.
Yeah.
So that's really exciting. And I've just been living, working, playing here, you know, and now I think it's time to step up and be a representative in city council. You know, be the change that I want to see for local government.
Nice.
Yeah.
So let's jump into some listener questions.
Okay, sounds good.
Our first one that got a lot of people submitted various versions of this, and then I've just kind of sanitized the language or homogenized them into like basically the thesis of the, you know, because if it's like when you got 10 people asking different versions of the same question. Anyway, this boiled down version is, what will you do to protect public input at city council meetings?
So, public input is by far and large one of the best aspects of the city council meetings, in my personal opinion. I have utilized it a couple times. If you YouTube the city council meetings or just simply Google my name, you'll actually find a couple segments and quotes. You know, there was actually a time about a month and a half ago to where I had stood up there, used my chance at public input to speak about the importance of not cutting people off. You know, public input, it's there for a reason. The public needs a chance to publicly address the council, needs a chance to make sure that nobody has any questions of where they stand, what they're concerned with, and allows the council to be on camera and recorded in their reactions when the public brings up a concern. I would never, ever advocate getting rid of public input. I would actually like to see if we can't find out more ways that public input can be received. So like through digital media, or, you know, maybe a forum or letters written in that become public, something to that effect.
How to follow up on that?
Sure.
How do you feel about, there's been some talk of like moving public input to like the end of the meeting, or to having it like as a separate meeting thing that's like an hour before the regular council meeting. I've heard a bunch of different ideas floated around.
You know, so the problem that I have in moving the time is that there isn't a whole lot of research on what's going to be the most effective. I'm definitely an advocate. Make sure that we do our research, make sure that we know what the effect is going to be. I would absolutely not be for moving the public input to the end of the session. Because let's face it, let's say that we're excited for an event, it runs its time, we've spent 2 hours doing deliberations or whatever, what do you want to do towards the end of the event? You just want to get out of there. And my concern is, and you know, I'm one of those people that I'm very attentive, but my concern is that it's very common for people that when we're ready to get out of there, we don't really care what people are going to say, just as human beings. And the last thing I would want to see is a disengaged city council during one of the most crucial pieces of our city government and the input section from the public.
Sure. Let's see. Our next listener question is, what will you do to increase government transparency?
Government transparency, I believe that that's a twofold question. You know, a lot of people say, hey, government transparency, I want to know more of what's going on, and that's great. But I think the reason why I see it's twofold, first thing, it's our tax money. We absolutely have a right to know where it goes. You know, I used an analogy in another interview that I had done that, let's say that you had given me $20 of your money, said, please go invest this money. And let's say that through mishaps, lack of research, whatever ends up happening, I've invested this money unwisely. I have a couple different options. The first thing is that you can ask me, what happened to my money? What'd you do with it? No, I can choose to take the current government's route, at least from what we've seen in a lot of cases, and say, well, we've invested it, that's really all that we can tell you. You know, or I can't really tell you all the details because of agreements and, you know, and the things that we've signed and all that, and that's just complete garbage. Or what I can do is I can tell you, here's what we've done. We've invested your money. Unfortunately, it was an unwise investment. And that does a couple things. First thing is you're absolutely maybe going to think that maybe I'm not the best person to be spending your money. Maybe you're going to think that I'm not the best person to be in the position. Maybe you're going to think that you don't really like my money's management. That's okay, because I'm going to strive to become better at spending your money, but it's also going to have the effect of communicating that you can trust what I'm going to say. I'm not trying to hide anything. I'm not trying to, you know, keep it behind closed doors. I mean, business, the only reason why you would need to keep any business behind closed doors is if it's dirty business. And you know, I've said that at a council meeting too, business isn't dirty unless you're doing dirty business. As far as the other side of transparency, responsiveness, I think, can go a long ways. A lot of times what we're seeing is councilors, when they get voting into certain events, take for example the downtown parking ramp project. You know, I use this as a case in point because a lot of people were paying attention during that. Several councilors simply voted yes or simply voted no. Two of them that voted no additionally provided comment on there. Pat Starr actually walked out and tried to abstain from voting. Teresa Staley cited the public input, cited everything that she'd done for research, cited everything, you know, that she felt, and explained everything before she cast her vote. Greg Neitzer did a little bit of explaining, but for the rest of it, just being honest, I didn't hear a whole lot of explanation, and I think that speaks to a lack of responsiveness. We listened to almost 2 hours of public input throughout the course of that, and only 3 councilors are acknowledging the public out of 8. That's not transparent. That's not responsive. That's not. You're not listening to the public at that point. Acknowledge them. Even if you don't agree, acknowledge that you're listening to what they're saying. That's what I'm going to do.
So you're saying that even, like, hypothetically, if you were in that scenario and you were in favor of the motion, you were one of them, you would at least address to the public why you were in favor of it.
Yes. And
let them know some of your, like, reasoning, kind of like Neitzer did.
Yes, exactly. And, you know, and what that does is, again, we come back to transparency. You know why I'm voting the way that I am. Because if I just say yes or no, you would naturally, and I would expect you to have questions, who talked to me behind, where am I getting my information, am I just woke up today and thought that it was going to be a no vote or a yes vote? You know, you deserve to know why I'm voting the way that you are, and this comes down to one thing. City councilors are our representatives, at least they're supposed to be. They're one voice out of all of us. You know, I want to be that one voice among all the other people, and it's going to be very possible that someday I'm going to have to cast a no vote, you know, because most of the public has come up to me and said, hey, no. And that's my job as a representative.
Okay. Let's see. The next listener question is, what are your goals if you're elected?
So my main goals, transparency is definitely one of them. Your open door to city government, that's me. That's become a recent, thing, especially with everything that's been coming up as far as, secret contracts regarding the Denny Sanford building. Then we can't find out who the investors are on the parking ramp project. We can't find out who's bidding on downtown. Let's figure out a way to make all this madness stop. Just tell us who's spending money where and what's going on. But as far as platform issues, the main things that I'm focused on are infrastructure maintenance and development. We are about to hit 200,000 people. We're growing very quickly. We're going to start growing at an exponential rate, as data shows. So we need to make sure that we're maintaining what we have. Guarantee you've noticed a few potholes this last weekend. We need to make sure that we're staying on top of those. We also need to make sure that we are preparing for, as our city hits those city limits, they're predefined already. We need to prepare for the infrastructure to be in place and realize that we're going to have a lot more people. And if we're not staying on top of what we already have and properly preparing for moving forward, we're going to find ourselves up the creek without a paddle, almost literally. Now, another issue that I'm passionate about is crime rate control. We have a horrible, it's really sad epidemic going on with meth and opioid use here in Sioux Falls. That's contributing a lot to crime. A lot of it is also what I consider community breakdown. I want to see more programs come back in, like the Neighborhood Watch program or the Helping Hands program, which was one where children would be able to come to a place that's safe and, because their parents maybe aren't doing the best, or they're experiencing bullying, or they need some advice from somebody who's in the neighborhood.
As a member of City Council, how would you encourage something like a Neighborhood Watch to get started?
So, one of the things that needs to happen is we need somebody to be out there in public resource and driver of that. And I think it's an excellent position for any city councilor to get on board, and maybe even something that can be sponsored by the city. Not necessarily financially, except maybe in the form of informationals or assistance in putting something like that together. Neighborhood Watch was a great program. There are still a couple active chapters in Sioux Falls, but it seems to be gone of the days where you knew your next door neighbors. You knew all the kids in the neighborhood. You would know who was supposed to be grounded or who's, got the new bike in town, stuff like that. And we just don't see as much of that anymore. Now it's everybody stays inside, plays video games, or keeps to themselves and doesn't talk to their neighbors. Or we get wrapped up in our lives. And I want to see more of that community interaction, because the more we know our neighbors, the more we know who aren't our neighbors and what doesn't belong. Additionally, on a third point is affordable housing. Right now, Sioux Falls, unfortunately, the average one-bedroom apartment can cost you over $700. Okay, and if you're doing the math on that, most entry-level jobs, or starting-level jobs are $10 to $12.50 an hour in Sioux Falls.
Yep.
$700 a month, that's quite literally about half of your monthly paycheck just in rent. And then you've got all the other bills. And then let's imagine that you don't have an income, you're on limited income like SSI, disability, or, any number of other things that could be affecting that. It's very hard to find a place to live for a lot of people. And if you do find a place to live, it needs to be safe and it needs to be well maintained. And so we've got a lot of things that we need to do with regards to that. One of the things that I'm definitely wanting to do is creating an incentive program for landlords to be able to receive incentives on properly maintaining their apartments. First thing, everyone's required, make sure that your places are safe. But if you want to do something extra, and let's say that you're putting on a new roof a couple of years before you really need to, or you're participating in one of these neighborhood community development programs, or you're encouraging a healthy and sustainable community, whatever the requirements end up being that we have incentives for, we want to be able to figure out a way to incentivize landlords to properly maintain their communities, properly maintain their properties.
Okay. Let's see. Other than expanding police, what would you do to proactively respond to rising crime?
I think we just answered that, actually. It's the police department. Let's be super clear. We need to make sure that we're managing our police officers per capita. We have a pretty good rate going right now. I'd like to see a few more officers there just to help out with the drug interdiction. I spent some time speaking to the police chief. He was, very polite, very informative as far as the different initiatives that are currently affecting the police department right now. So making sure that they're properly staffed is the first thing. I'm not an advocate of overstaffing, but properly staffing is absolutely crucial. Other than that, like I said, let's build our communities again. Let's get to know our neighbors. Let's get to know, who each other are, and think about all the other great things that happen with that. We start seeing block parties and, cookouts and, hey, come on over for the fire on Saturday, stuff like that. So I think with that, we'll knock down some of that crime.
Okay. How will you ensure that Sioux Falls is a community that welcomes people from all walks of life? LGBT, immigrant, refugee, etc.
So all walks of life, I think Sioux Falls, for the most part, is doing a really good job with this. I do know several individuals that are part of the LGBTQ community. I don't have any discriminatory preferences towards any individual. I can tell you that I have met people of all races, all creeds, all colors, all sexual identities, gender identities. I've been very fortunate to come out of the foster care system where you see a lot of that stuff coming into play, and underneath very stressful environments as well. People are people. You can either choose to be a good person or a bad person. So I'm not going to discriminate you because of another identifier in your life. I'm going to discriminate how you're treating other people. As far as being welcoming, we need to make sure that our government isn't discriminating for any of those reasons as well. It's that simple.
Okay. How would you work towards getting more people on a living wage and getting more living wage jobs in Sioux Falls?
So this is workforce development, by definition in the question. Very hot topic right now. As I mentioned, a lot of entry-level jobs.
Yeah, we had a lot of interest in that question.
Yeah. So 10 to 12, 15 an hour, that's the average. That's not doing it. The biggest thing here is housing. Housing market, we need to slow down the growth on that. But the wage market, we need to accelerate the growth by pulling them up. And what this means is that we don't do this in a fashion of creating a minimum wage. Studies show that becomes far too costly, especially when we start looking at the service industries, restaurants, delivery, individuals, car service detail people, those that are in those entry-level jobs. It hurts that market significantly, which does more damage than what we have currently. So the option that we are left with is to create what's called primary industry. And primary industry is basically the concept of, like factory-type jobs and, growth opportunities and jobs that are going to pay more. Let's take Costco, for example. Costco is a large warehouse that, sells wholesale goods, and they pay a great amount of money. That as a result, Sam's Club, in comparison, in the region is forced to raise their wages because they're losing all the people going over to Costco, for example.
Sure.
So the same effect happens when we start bringing in primary industry that is paying more money to begin with for their starting individuals. If we got, let's say, an ag processor in, one that's low in pollution byproduct, one that's going to source local goods from the neighboring communities, then we would benefit our community, bringing more money into our area. And if we sell it out of state, we bring in even more money, which then supplies the growth of the wages. The more people that go for those higher paying jobs, the more that the bottom needs to start raising theirs in order to keep up. Does that make sense?
Yeah. How would a city councilor and city policy help bring this, like, ag processor that you're talking about, this hypothetical company? How would you bring them to Sioux Falls through, directly through city council policy?
So, the first thing that we need to do before we start targeting these individuals, by individuals I mean companies that are looking at Sioux Falls, is to make sure that we have proper ordinances in place to be very clear about the rules that they would have to abide by if they're here. Make sure that we're very clear. This is what's available for tax revenue here if you decide to build a facility. This is what's available for regulation. Here's the resources that we have. Here's the experiences of other industries that have come, in the area or the community. Make sure that we're very clear in our policies what's going to be expected if they decide to come here to Sioux Falls. With that, it eliminates a lot of questions. It eliminates a lot of, is Sioux Falls going to accept us as a company? And will ultimately drive that confidence that they would want to have before they move to Sioux Falls.
So you're saying transparency is basically where you... Okay.
Exactly, but as far as ordinances go, because city councilors are supposed to write policy.
Yeah.
Making sure that our policies aren't too confusing or too unclear in what's going to be expected of.
So possibly, I feel like you're right on the verge of saying like deregulation a little bit.
Proper regulation that's clear and understandable.
Okay, I can handle that. Simplifying.
Think Lyft, for example. I mean, this is a huge project. It was actually Lyft had a lot of interactions with our local city councilors in determining, what ordinances are going to be allowed, and everything was set up, groundwork first before Lyft even agreed to come to Sioux Falls. All those rules had to be put into place. What was going to be expected? How were they going to be licensed? What kind of insurance were they going to be required to carry? Background checks, all these different things were laid out before Lyft even said, yeah, okay, we'll come to Sioux Falls. And that's how city council is supposed to handle it.
Okay. Anything else on the workforce development that you wanted to... Okay.
No, let's get rid of this idea that South Dakota is a cheap labor state. We deserve to make just as much money as anybody else. And, to be honest, we have a better work ethic than a lot of different places outside. I mean, the Midwest is the place to get workers. We like to work hard.
Fair enough. Okay. You're driving down a dark road on a stormy night. You're groggy, your vision is getting a little blurry, and as you round the corner you see a squirrel in the middle of the road playing a tiny magic glass flute. Do you swerve or take the ditch to miss the squirrel, or do you hit the squirrel?
Oh, this is a loaded question. I love this question, by the way. I absolutely do. So first thing, let's point out that if you're tired and groggy, you probably shouldn't be driving to begin with. Let's say that, mistakes were made. You found yourself in this situation. For the humor side of it, what song is he playing on the flute?
That is a great question. I haven't had anyone ask that.
Okay.
I would assume some kind of like Peter and the Wolf, na 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 na, something very fluty. Okay. And classic. Okay. Something public domain.
Fantastic. I can respect that. Good song choice. Bravo, avoiding that copyright.
There you go.
That's proper. Good job on the squirrel. Quite honestly, it's you avoid the squirrel if you can. You need to make sure that you're driving safe to begin with.
Okay.
Like that's about the only way that you can answer that.
Very good. And the final question,
okay.
This is always my question, and it's how I've ended all these interviews since I've been doing them. Why should I, specifically over any other candidate, vote for you?
The reason why you should vote for me is because in comparison to the other candidates that are out there, I am the only one that is currently working a full-time job, and I'm not working in a business that I own. Or that I am heavily invested in. I work as a regular employee. I have a boss that I have to go to. I have attendance that I need to make sure that I keep. It's all, other policies. that are set there for me. And in addition to this, I'm living my life just like the majority of Sioux Falls. You know, I am what we're seeing in the majority of Sioux Falls. Yes, there's a lot of people who own businesses, but there's even more people who report to those businesses and work every day. You know, there's even more people that have to manage their time wisely, that have to, you know, find time to come in and do podcasts, you know, like this. And it's that the reason you should vote for me is because I'm more like you than the other guys are.
Very good. Thor, thank you for coming on, and good luck.
Thank you. I really...